Well, time for another Sheriff Sit Down presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union. I'm in the office here of Mason County Sheriff Ryan Spurling. How are you?
Great. Good to see you, Jeff.
Feeling better after the plunge this past weekend?
What a great event. Wasn't that fun?
It was so great, and it's the 15th year the Hood Canal Alliance have put this up and put it on for Mason County Emergency Services. There's about 6 organizations, including the chaplain and the dive team and the fire halls that are there helping to make sure people are safe too. And every year it gets bigger and better. I think just goes to show the level of commitment the community has to public safety. And I know you're welcomed, with open arms when you're out at your different lunches around the community and people see you out and about. It's just a great testament to that. And it's nice too to know that people feel an ownership in Mason County about protecting the county as a whole.
Well, community safety isn't to be abdicated just to law enforcement because there's not enough of us, right? That would be military. It's called policing by consent, and that means we have to have a relationship with our communities and be interacting, and there has to be trust there as well. And, that's one of the greatest recruiting tools I have. We can't pay as much as Kitsap or Thurston. We don't have the tax base. But we have a community that supports us and has supported us even through the anti-police rhetoric. And it's been really nice. And it's kept our people. That's a big thing on retention, is our people care about their law enforcement and they're part of their community and they get involved. And that's an example of it.
You hear about some of that anti-police rhetoric, especially coming out from the major media markets in the state, Seattle, and they've got kind of a hyper focus there with the news organizations that broadcast out of there. But even during those tougher times where you saw the protests and the things happening up at CHOP or whatever it was called up in Seattle, we still never really saw a sense of that. At least I didn't from where I was out and about. Didn't really see a sense of that here in Mason County.
As a matter of fact, we saw an increase in people showing their appreciation in Mason County because they were embarrassed that the law enforcement wasn't treated well in other places, and they wanted to make sure that we felt good that they were supporting us, and we got a tremendous amount of support. Yeah, we had some people that were expressing their concerns in an opposite direction, and we're going to be open to listen because we want to hear from all our citizens.
One of the things too that I just thought of while you were saying that is that you, as the sheriff of record, as over the years if we've talked, you were on the front lines of advocating for more of, I guess, like the body cams and more ways that the people could feel as though, they're able to keep an eye on you or to have that information or for you to have those body cams. That was something that you really pushed in the county and said, listen, this is great for all of us.
It's absolutely. I mean, I have no fear of police accountability because all the way back to the 1200s, it's a real thing. We have too much authority to not be held accountable, so I'm never afraid of that. It just has to be balanced, and it wasn't balanced in 2021. There was a lot of unanticipated consequences that the legislature did not see, and they didn't consult with law enforcement. And I've been doing this for a long time. People don't get into law enforcement to do bad. It's the only job where you go through a polygraph, you go through a psych, you go through an extensive background, interviewing your neighbors and all that type of stuff. There's no other profession that does that, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, there are a few bad cops, but that is not the light that we should all be painted in.
Right.
The majority of the people out there want to do the right thing. So I'm really a big advocate of the body cams because what it does is it catches our officers doing the right things and it allows us to be able to celebrate that.
Yeah, and then too, I think, and you've said this as well, when it's bad guy versus cop there or sheriff or deputy, there's sometimes they'll run, right? Then if you add the canine into it, people aren't running. They're not going anywhere.
Well, they know that the dogs don't hold back.
No, they're going to chase after them. And then two, kind of if somebody feels as though they've got a right to berate your fellow officers. Well, now when the camera shows up,
I can't tell you how many. When I was with the State Patrol and they first got the body cams, 35% of all complaints against troopers disappeared. 35%. Now, I have, as a patrol chief before I became sheriff, I got complaints. Oh, the deputy was unprofessional and they cussed at me and they did this. And I said, hey, I got a body cam video. I'm going to be able to go and watch that. And they'd go, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Because the reality was they were in a very elevated emotional state and they probably said things that they didn't really necessarily want to say. So it escalates the situation. And when they're held accountable, that's a good thing too.
What is happening with you and how is the county when it comes to the sheriff's budget? We are seeing a lot across the state, massive issues when it comes to different budgets. The state's budget is, a couple $2 billion in the hole based on who you talk to. City budgets are getting blown up all over the place. School district budgets are really facing some severe things. How have you, especially now that you've got 2 new commissioners up this session, at least 1 new
No, we got 1 new commissioner.
That's right. And so how is that all working for you? Are you still able to advocate and get the supplies that you need to keep safe here, or?
You got to give kudos to our commissioners in Mason County because we're not facing the budget crisis that most of our neighbors are. They handled the money during COVID and all that stuff pretty well. I'm not an economist. I'm not a big financial guy. I appreciate those that are good at that.
Yeah.
And our commissioners did a good job. They've actually added positions to our office in our budget this year, and they have given us a soft commitment to try to get us to at least 1 deputy per 1,000 citizens because, again, everybody knows 14, 15 years now, Washington State's really low. So they've been moving us in the right direction for the last 3 years, and I'm very grateful for their frugalness with the budget and not getting us in a position where we're in crisis as a county.
I was talking to Representatives Griffey and Couture a couple weeks ago, right along the same lines as this. The new governor, Ferguson, has made comments and suggestions that he is interested in continuing to add to the rolls here so Washington is not the 51st, including the District of Columbia, state out of the union to be per capita for law enforcement. But they mentioned that it's not just the financial part of it. It's not just giving you money to be able to pay people more or more compatible rates compared to the counties, but it's also changing the culture of how people feel about law enforcement. The DARE program is back in Pioneer schools. I know that it's being talked about being added to other school districts across Mason County, but how has that helped in the last few weeks that that's been on board to kind of... So here's a story, right? So I have a friend whose kid's school is getting ready for a career expo, career day, bring the people in, and they don't want law enforcement officer to come in uniform for fear that it may be a trigger for some of the students who are, like maybe they're in a neighborhood or something where they see law enforcement a lot or something like that. And so when I brought that up to the representatives, they couldn't quite believe it, but
yeah.
That's what they were saying. They'd rather not have a law enforcement professional, especially in that situation, being shown in a positive light about here's what I do for a living and here's, things like that. So how is the overall state culture, you feel, moving? Is it moving back to a positive for law enforcement, or is it still kind of stagnant? Or, I mean, Mason County is an anomaly, I know we talked about
right.
that, but overall, if you want to make Washington as law enforcement friendly as Mason County is, how is that, or what are your counterparts saying across the state?
Well, I got the unique opportunity along with other sheriffs and chiefs of police to go up to Olympia a week ago Tuesday, and I heard from Governor Ferguson, and I got to hear from the Attorney General and from some of the legislators. And you know, Governor Ferguson is stuck to it that he wants to not be last in the nation. And he made it very clear he's not going to approve a budget unless there's $100 million for adding law enforcement. But as Griffey and Couture said, you can throw money at a problem, but that's not necessarily a problem. Look at the legislation that they're trying to pass now that says that law enforcement can't do traffic stops because somehow we're bad people, and as long as we don't contact people, we won't cause all the problems. So 25 years in the State Patrol.
Wait a second. What now?
They're trying to say that we cannot stop people for a taillight out as a primary stopping tool. We have to have something else. They're trying to pass legislation. You'll see it on the law.
Wow.
So that's a big deal. Here's one thing that people don't understand. As a trooper or as a law enforcement officer, as a deputy, as a city officer, we make contacts with citizens all the time. Oftentimes, we make contacts when they're in a very crisis-oriented situation and things aren't going well or they're a victim. When we do a traffic stop, we're letting them know, we're educating them, you have a tail light out. Most of the traffic stops are just positive, good contacts with our citizens. And a lot of times that's their only opportunity to have a law enforcement officer contact. Yeah. And it's a great opportunity for us to educate. And we don't have to write them a ticket over every little thing, but we help them know. If you're driving down the road with one headlight out, and then your other headlight goes out, now where are you at? Right. You're in a real dangerous situation, so we let them know. Could we write them a ticket? Yeah, but not very many officers do. The other piece that you don't understand is people who commit crimes drive. Every single day across the state of Washington, from basic equipment violations, we end up making arrests of people who have committed murders, domestic violences, all these different things because criminals that have committed crimes drive. And oftentimes, if they're committing crimes, they're not taking care of their driver's license, they're not taking care of the equipment on their car, they're not keeping their registration up to date, and those are all indicators of other deeper problems. If you take away the ability for law enforcement to stop people for equipment violations, now people are going to die because of faulty equipment out there because it's not a primary. Second of all, we're going to have less opportunities to have positive contacts with the community and help them. One of the things I always did is said, hey, do you have any questions for me? Are you lost? Do you need any assistance? And I can't tell you how many times people just wanted to talk or tell me how to get here or ask for the area because they're not from the area. Those are things that are going to get missed out if this law is passed. And now that's what they're talking about. Laws that degrade what we do as law enforcement and that they don't trust us to have the ability to stop somebody for a tail light out because we're somehow going to make them out to be a criminal when they're not.
Where, and you don't have to answer this, but where or why, how would that even come about? I mean, who would sit, I mean, that to me is like a think tank kind of a thing. That is not necessarily something that I would say is based in any sort of reality. Where is that coming from?
It's mostly coming from the Washington Coalition on Police Accountability and Representative Goodman. And
so is it they feel maybe at one point somebody got stopped because of the type of car, the color of their skin, something,
and we have a lot of things in place to track whether we have bias-based policing. We have to report on that every single year. We have to report what is our population made up in Washington? What is it in Mason County? How does that compare to our stops? So there's a lot of boundaries already. And then if we start making bias-based policing, we will get sued and the agencies will suffer in that way. So there's a lot of those things in place already. This I don't understand. It just comes from a place that obviously they think that the police are the bad guys.
Is that so? Are there no officers on this panel? Or, I mean, is there no counter?
Well, this is a bill that's been introduced.
Right, but you say it comes from, and I would imagine it's also the same organization that we've talked about too, that is potentially looking at taking away the citizens' rights to vote on this thing. So if it's a panel, I mean, is it all non-law enforcement individuals on this thing? Is there a minority of law enforcement who don't have the votes to kind of say,
You know,
Look at what you're doing here.
Griffey and Couture would be able to answer that better than
I'm going
I
to talk to
could.
them about this.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
That's their world more so than mine.
Sure, sure. You're just following, again, the laws that come through.
That's what we do. We enforce the laws that our legislators make, and that's what the balance of power is. And a lot of people don't understand that we don't make the laws; we just enforce them.
Yeah.
So that's an important piece for us. Is we let them make the laws, but we do express our concerns over certain things that are going to have a negative impact. Again, if you pull all positive contacts with our citizens away, how is it that we're going to be able to build the trust of our community?
Sure. Wow.
I can't tell you how many times over the years people thank me or thank officers for stopping them because they had a really positive contact and they were educated.
Yeah. And two, for the persons getting stopped, if when they see the lights come on behind them, and I've been in those situations,
It's scary, I know.
it's something to be a teachable moment for the kids in the car.
Yes,
it
it
can
is.
either be these frackin' cops, what, they got nothing better to do, these idiots, or whatever, and then the kid hears that, and that's how they then perceive it in an interaction.
And that's why I've always purposefully talked with the kids and try to give them stickers so that even if it's a negative with the parent, because people don't like getting caught doing the wrong things if they're speeding. I mean, none of us do. That's human nature. And they may even say things that they don't necessarily mean. But we want a positive experience for the kids that they know that they can trust us, because otherwise that makes them more prone to being victimized. It's just like right now, some of our Latino culture is being victimized because they're afraid to come to local law enforcement and report the crimes because they're afraid of being deported because they don't know Washington state law.
And there's none of that. Is there any of that happening? Or you're not involved if ICE is in town? I've seen reports, and again, it's on social media, Shelton Talks, which is whatever, but people will say, I saw ICE here, or I heard that ICE was there. When they come in, or if they have come into the community, do you go, are you directed to go with them, or how does that work?
No. The federal government has no control over local law enforcement, and Washington state law is very clear. And again, we don't make the law, we just follow it. Washington state law is very specific that we cannot ask somebody their immigration status, and we cannot keep any records on immigration status. But if the federal government comes to us and asks us a question, we can answer what we do know, and we have to by federal law. But we cannot ask them when we do a traffic stop what your immigration status is, because that's our Washington state law.
Yeah.
If they commit a crime, that changes dynamics as well. And it doesn't matter where you come from, what your nationality, what language you speak. If you commit a crime, we're going to deal with it. And that's what we're here for, is public safety. We're not here to enforce federal immigration laws, and Washington state is very clear about that. I would be violating state law.
Do you have a officer, a deputy, plainclothes deputy that goes and talks to different groups, CLO or whoever, to explain those types of things? So like to back that up, Deputy Colbinson, who does the DARE programs, he's in the schools, he's got a great smile, he's a fun-loving guy, and he's able to connect with the kids on the programs and being safe and responsible. Do you have that kind of a person, or is there an ability to have that type of a person come in and make a presentation at these types of group settings where, here's the law, we want to know if there's crimes happening, don't be afraid to come?
Absolutely. And here's the interesting thing too, is we have officers that are from those communities, that grew up in those communities, that are our deputies, and they are expressing that to their own communities.
Okay.
And that's probably the best way to get it out. But the city just recently had an individual who ran because he was afraid of being deported, and he now committed a felony when he really didn't need to, and he
Sure.
probably would have had no, and people were endangered. So we don't want that to happen, and we don't want people to be afraid to report that they've been victimized, because we're not allowed to ask them their immigration status in Washington State. That is the law, the RCWs that we have to follow. And then we also follow the federal law that says if ICE comes and asks us a question, we will give them the information we have, but Washington State doesn't allow us to keep records or even ask, so it limits that.
Yeah, I bet. Interesting. Well, I think we'll have more of these conversations as they move forward. If you ever have any questions, of course, for Sheriff here or the Sheriff's Office, you can always email me. I'll put the links in that. These conversations are brought to you by our great friends at our Community Credit Union, who are big supporters of law enforcement, and not only the sheriffs, but the state, but the city of Shelton and the other areas that they have.
They're supporters of our community.
Yeah, they are. They
Yeah.
got in this. They got in the plunge this weekend.
Yes, they did. They had a whole team.
It was cold for sure. Next year's Polar Plunge will be on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2026. So we'll be out knocking on doors, raising money again for these great organizations in Mason County. Sheriff Spurling, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. Thank you for what you do. And,
Thank you.
You hosting those events. Everybody loves to see you. It's just, I was disappointed you didn't get in the water
Well,
this year.
I got all the equipment.
I know, you're busy.
No, one of these days I'll get back in for sure.
Yeah.